Hello, I'm Taryn, and I used to think being the good daughter meant staying quiet, staying helpful, staying small. I paid their bills, fixed their roof, covered for their chaos. Then one day, after years of sacrifices, my mom texted me, "Mortgage is due." My dad followed up with, "Don't be selfish." And I realized they were never planning to leave me anything. Not the house, not the savings, not even a thank you. They gave it all to my sister, the one who never paid a dime. So I replied with 3 words: handle it yourself. But what came next? It wasn't just betrayal. It was a campaign to erase me. And now I can't stop asking, was I ever their daughter, or just their backup plan? I was scraping the last of last night's reheated chicken piccata into the trash when my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and glanced at the screen. A transfer request from my mother. Again, $1,875. Label: mortgage. No message. No, "Hey honey," no, "Hope you're well." Just numbers. I didn't even blink. I'd seen that request, different numbers, same expectation, dozens of times before. It was practically its own calendar event. But this time, something in me hesitated. Not because I couldn't afford it. I could, barely. But because I didn't want to anymore. I'd been covering pieces of my parents' mortgage on and off for over a decade. I started during the recession, when Dad's business slowed. Then it was the new roof, then the AC, then groceries during the pandemic. Somehow, I had morphed into the backup plan for everything. I walked over to the sink, rinsed the empty container, and set it in the drying rack. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge and the slow spin of the ceiling fan above. Outside, Austin's late summer sun beat down on the patio. The heat clung to the air like a blanket no one wanted. I opened my banking app and stared at the request. Something told me to just delete it. Not decline, not send. Just let it sit. But old habits are hard to break. I tapped decline. The little spinning wheel turned for a second, then confirmed the action. I had barely set my phone down when it rang. My dad. I didn't even hesitate. I picked up. "Don't be selfish, Taryn," he said, not even waiting for a hello. His voice was flat, almost annoyed. "This is still your home." I stayed quiet for a beat. My pulse quickened slightly, but I kept my tone calm. "I'm not being selfish," I replied. "I'm just tapped out." He sighed like I was being dramatic, like I was a teenager refusing to mow the lawn. "You know this place means something to the family," he said. "It's where you grew up, where your mother built her garden, where we raised you and your sister." "Exactly," I said. "You raised us. It's not a debt I have to keep paying forever." Silence. The kind of silence that isn't about listening. It's about waiting for you to fall back in line. "I'll talk to your mother," he said finally, and hung up. Just like that. I stood there holding the phone, heart beating a little faster than it had a moment ago. Not because of the money, not even because of the conversation, but because of how expected it had all felt. Like a script we'd all been handed years ago, and no one ever thought to rewrite. I walked back to the living room, dropped into the couch, and stared at the ceiling fan turning above. My fingers absently rubbed the hem of my pajama top. I hadn't even changed yet. It was nearly noon. Freelance tax work from home had its luxuries, and today I was taking full advantage. But something inside me was simmering. I thought about the time I paid for the water heater to be replaced, $1,300. I'd sent the check overnight because Mom had called crying. I thought about the time I covered 3 months of groceries when Seraphine lost her job again. I thought about the insulation I paid for after a freeze cracked the pipes. All those moments had blended into a quiet rhythm of giving without acknowledgement. I was the good one, the stable one, the rock, the one who didn't need anything. And Seraphine? She floated from crisis to crisis like a damn soap bubble, untouched, shiny, delicate. She'd had 4 jobs in 5 years, 2 engagements, 1 minor DUI that was quietly swept under the rug. And still, when family photos were shared, when stories were told, it was always about Seraphine's creative spirit or her resilience. My name came up only when they needed my signature or my bank routing number. I took a deep breath and sat up straight. Then I unlocked my phone, opened the text message thread with Mom, and typed, "Handle it yourself." 3 words, no emoji, no signature. I hit send. There was no immediate reply. No angry call. Just the quiet satisfaction of choosing myself, even for one damn moment. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. But I felt clean. Like rinsing off after standing in a room full of cigarette smoke. You still smell it, but it's no longer clinging to your skin. Later that evening, I tried to distract myself with a movie, something light. But my mind kept circling back to that conversation. Dad's tone, the expectation in it, the way he used the word home like a chain, not a memory. I curled up on the couch with a throw blanket and stared at the darkening sky outside the window. The hum of Austin traffic dipped into a low whisper, and the apartment around me felt more like my sanctuary than ever before. But somewhere under all that quiet, something nagged at me. I kept replaying that moment in my mother's office a few weeks ago, when I helped her recover some lost emails and reorganize her folders. I had noticed a file on her desktop I didn't open. It was labeled Final Will. At the time, I had assumed it was just legal prep. My parents liked to plan ahead. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the light filtering through the blinds still carried that soft, gray-pink hue that makes everything feel suspended. I lay still for a few minutes, but my thoughts had already broken the silence. I couldn't shake the image of my dad's voice through the phone, dismissing me like a disobedient employee, or the fact that I'd finally sent that 3-word message. Handle it yourself. I should have felt some guilt or regret, but I didn't. Not even a flicker. What I did feel, strangely, was curiosity. As I moved into the kitchen and started my coffee, it returned to me like a whispered reminder. That folder, that damn file I saw on my mom's laptop when I was helping her set up her printer 2 months ago. She was fumbling with her email, complaining about lost passwords and the cloud, and I sat there, trying not to groan as I navigated through outdated settings and slow-loading pages. That's when I'd seen it, a desktop file labeled Final Will. I hadn't opened it. Not then. It wasn't my place, and at the time, I figured it was just estate prep, like most couples their age start thinking about when life slows down. But something didn't sit right now. The way Dad had spoken to me, like I owed them, the absence of any apology or even acknowledgement that they'd gotten too used to my silence, too used to me footing the bills like it was expected. After finishing my coffee and feeding Benny, my slightly overweight tabby who liked to act starved at every meal, I walked over to my desk and opened my old laptop. I hadn't used it for anything but taxes and family-related stuff, but it still had Mom's login saved. I tapped in her email password. She never changed it, still used Vela Love 1990, the year she and Dad got married. As expected, it worked. I navigated through her folders. Everything was organized in that way moms do when they're not tech-savvy. Too many desktop files, redundant folders labeled Documents New and Keep, and nothing dated clearly. But eventually, I found it. Estate Plan, Final. I hesitated. For maybe half a second. Then I double-clicked. The document opened in Word. 12 pages. Legal format. I skimmed past the formalities. We, Leland and Odessa Vale, being of sound mind. And then I saw it. The entirety of the Vale estate, including the property located at 4476 Whitestone Drive, all vehicles, savings accounts, investment portfolios, and any outstanding benefits or entitlements shall be transferred in full to Seraphine Vale. My chest tightened. I blinked. Scrolled down. There was more. To our youngest daughter, Taryn Mallory, whom we love deeply, we express our endless pride in her independence and strength. That was it. Love and pride. No assets. No recognition of anything I'd contributed. Not even a token heirloom or passing mention of my financial involvement. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. Was this what they'd decided? After all these years? After every late-night phone call, every wire transfer, Every time I picked up their slack so they could hold on to that house and pretend we were still a perfect suburban family. My fingers tingled and my palms were damp. But I didn't cry. Not one tear. I was done shedding tears for people who only noticed my value when I was invisible. Instead, I got up and walked into the kitchen again, made a second cup of coffee, poured it slowly, as if I needed the process to keep me grounded. Sitting back down at the table, I opened a clean document. I titled it, The Cost of Being the Good Daughter. And then I started writing, not emotionally, not dramatically, just facts. I listed the date I covered the HVAC replacement, $6,000. I attached a scan of the invoice. I moved to the $1,500 in groceries I covered between March and May of 2020 when they couldn't leave the house. Then the property tax payments for 2021, 2022, and part of 2023, 3 separate transfers totaling nearly $9,200. I included the emails, the messages. Thanks again, honey, we'll pay you back soon. They never did. I compiled everything into folders, scanned receipts, downloaded PDF statements. There was no emotion in it, just the slow, careful work of building a case not for a courtroom, but for myself. As the hours passed, I realized I hadn't eaten. I microwaved a slice of banana bread from the freezer, forcing myself to chew slowly while watching the sun cross its arc outside the window. Then I remembered something else. The day Seraphine had totaled her second car, some overpriced coupe she couldn't afford, and Mom called me in tears. We just don't have the cash right now. Can you help cover the down payment on a used vehicle for her? That was $4,000. I added it to the list. By late afternoon, my folders were organized, labeled, dated. I stared at them and felt hollow, like I'd just built a monument to my own erasure. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they'd let me disappear behind Seraphine's chaos, the way they'd made me feel like less because I didn't need them. And now, they'd chosen her, in writing, to carry their legacy, not the one who helped them preserve it. I closed the laptop, exhaled, the kind of exhale that doesn't release anything, it just confirms the air still works. My phone buzzed again. It was the same pending transfer request from Mom. She hadn't canceled it. I opened it, stared at the amount, then hit delete. Not decline, not postpone, just gone. I set the phone face down on the table. Then I looked out the window, watched the wind shift the leaves on the oak tree across the parking lot, and for the first time, I whispered something I had never dared say aloud. It's time they learned who I really am. I didn't burn the bridges right away. That was the surprising part. Not that I wanted to, but that I didn't. Not yet. I gave myself that Saturday. No calls, no outside plans, no distractions, just me, a pot of coffee that kept reheating in the microwave, and a quiet apartment that had started to feel like a war room. I sat cross-legged on the living room rug with my laptop, 2 bank envelopes stuffed with receipts, and my just-in-case flash drive. By 9:30 in the morning, I was digging into records I hadn't looked at in years. When you pay for things out of love or obligation, which often looks the same, you don't think to catalog them. But I'd been raised to keep everything. And I had mortgage copays, HVAC installation in the summer of 2019. $6,000 I wired to my father after he forgot to renew the insurance, and a tree limb fell straight through the garage roof. I found the transfer confirmation in a dusty email folder titled Family, Financial Stuff. That same folder held screenshots of grocery orders I placed every week during the pandemic when they didn't want to step foot in a store, and the monthly $325 that left my account for almost 3 years to help cover their property taxes, never once reimbursed. I opened a new folder on my desktop. Evidence. That word felt foreign in this context, but accurate. I wasn't documenting to brag. I wasn't looking for credit. I was done with credit. I needed proof. By lunchtime, my apartment looked like a filing cabinet had exploded. Papers lined the couch, the coffee table, and the floor. I'd gone full forensic accountant mode, color-coded folders, highlighters, sticky notes, and then I found it, buried in a small envelope with my name handwritten in my mother's careful cursive. A birthday card from 6 years ago. The front was generic, store-bought. Inside was a check for $50 and a note that read, "We're so proud of you. You never ask for anything. That's your strength." I stared at it. They were proud of me because I never asked for anything. Not, "We love how you show up for us." Not, "We see how much you've sacrificed." Just silent compliance. I slid the card into the folder. Later that afternoon, I opened an old shoebox tucked at the back of my closet. Inside were journals I hadn't touched in years. One was cracked open to a page dated March 4th, 2018. Sometimes I wonder if I disappeared. Would they notice, or would the mortgage just bounce? I didn't remember writing that. But the voice on the page, that version of me, she was exhausted. And worse, invisible. I closed the journal and sat with it for a minute, trying not to let the emotion catch in my throat. I wasn't crying. Not really. It was more like an internal weather shift, a drop in temperature, the sudden quiet before a storm. I opened my phone and scrolled back to old messages from Seraphine. One from last winter jumped out. "Hey, Mom said you covered the furnace repair. Thank you. I know it wasn't cheap. She was freaking out. You're a lifesaver." And then, 5 minutes later, she posted on Instagram, "New furnace installed, taking care of the family house like always." Like always. She hadn't paid a dime. There were more messages like that, little backhanded thank yous. "Appreciate it." Texts with heart emojis, but never a call, never a conversation, never accountability. I started seeing patterns, things I had ignored for years. The day I offered to help Mom refinance the house, and she said, "Oh no, that would complicate things." The time Dad said, "You're so good with money, we don't worry about you. It's Seraphine we need to support right now." Always her. She was always in transition, always recovering, always chasing something that kept failing. And I was the backdrop, not the child they celebrated, not the daughter they trusted, just the cushion they leaned on. That realization sat in my chest like a rock. I stood up, stretched my legs, and walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned on the counter, staring at the fridge. I had one photo of my parents there, taken maybe 6 years ago, at Thanksgiving. I was in the corner of the frame, half cropped out. Seraphine was in the center, holding up a glass of wine. That picture used to make me smile. Now it made my stomach turn. I walked back into the living room and stared at the laptop, the folders, the growing stack of evidence. It wasn't grief I felt. Not quite. It was insult. Offense. A quiet rage that had been mistaken for resilience. They thought my silence was agreement. They mistook my help for consent. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just sad anymore. I wasn't just hurt. I was ready. I closed the evidence folder and opened a blank Word document. At the top, I typed in bold letters, "The cost of being the good daughter. Not for them. For me." So when the lies started unraveling, and I knew they would, I'd be ready to show the math. That next week passed in eerie silence. No texts, no calls, no vague forwarding of inspirational quotes from Mom at 2 a.m., which had been her latest way of avoiding real conversation. I thought maybe they were finally letting go. Maybe they understood the line I had drawn. By Friday morning, the quiet felt almost suspicious. I'd just finished filing my last client's quarterly taxes when my phone buzzed with a text from Liz, my college roommate and one of the few people who'd stayed in touch. "Are you okay?" it read. "Your mom posted something strange on Facebook." My stomach clenched before I even opened the app. I hadn't been on Facebook in weeks. I mostly used it for small-town updates or the occasional neighborhood alert. I typed in my mom's name and pulled up her page, and there it was, pinned at the top. A status in bold font, the kind they let you use when you want to make a serious statement. "We raised our daughter with love. We supported her through school, celebrated her successes, and stood by her even when she was distant. We never thought we'd be abandoned when we needed her most." Below that, a photo. It was me, 7 years old, smiling with gap-toothed pride, hugging her around the waist in our old kitchen. The caption said, "Some kids forget who helped them become who they are." The post had over 150 likes. Comments flooded in from old family friends and her church circle. So sorry, Odessa. You don't deserve this. Breaks my heart. You and Leland are such good parents. Kids these days have no gratitude. My hands went cold. They weren't just airing dirty laundry, they were rewriting the story. And in theirs, I was the villain. It didn't take long for the ripple effect to reach me. That afternoon, a client canceled our follow-up session, citing a shift in financial priorities. Another one ghosted me completely. When I went to HEB the next day, a woman from my mom's church group, Janet something, gave me a tight-lipped nod at the produce aisle, then turned her cart sharply away. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but by the third person avoiding eye contact in the frozen food section, I knew. Word was spreading, not facts, just impressions. Their version of the truth, spoon-fed to anyone who would listen. I sat in my car outside the store for 15 minutes, not crying, just staring at the dashboard, letting it sink in. They weren't just upset with me, they were working to undo me. That night, as I sat in bed with my laptop, I saw that Seraphine had shared the post too. She had added her own commentary. Some people forget where they come from. I love my parents with all my heart. Always have. Always have. This was the same woman who once screamed at Dad in a Denny's parking lot because he wouldn't co-sign on a Jeep she couldn't afford. The same sister who forgot Mom's birthday 3 years in a row and once sent me a photo of an empty champagne bottle with the caption, "To our inheritance." And now she was riding the sympathy wave. Of course, she was. She knew exactly how to perform loyalty for a crowd. I clicked on her profile, looked at her curated photos, matching outfits with Mom, brunch selfies with captions like, "Family is everything," and a whole highlight reel labeled Vale Legacy. I closed the tab before I threw my laptop. The thing about small towns, even suburbs like ours that pretend they're part of Greater Austin, is that they're not as big as people think. Reputation doesn't echo, it ricochets. By Sunday, I'd received 3 separate messages from friends asking if I was doing okay or if I needed space to talk. Space? I didn't need space. I needed a damn megaphone. Instead, I sat down and started my own folder. Not one I would post publicly, not yet. I called it Family Spin Machine. I screenshotted the Facebook post, the comments, Seraphine's reply, the likes. I added links to every client cancellation email I'd received since the post went live. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was strategy. They wanted control of the narrative, and when they lost access to my money, they came for my name. And what got to me most wasn't even their lies, it was how easily people believed them. Because I was quiet, because I kept my head down, because I didn't blast my victories or document every donation I made. They had the louder voice, and right now, volume was winning over truth. I pulled my hair into a messy bun, clicked record on my webcam, and stared into the lens, not to publish, just to practice. "My name is Taryn Mallory," I said, my voice low. "I'm the daughter who paid the bills, kept the lights on, and covered the emergencies while everyone else was taking selfies." I paused. If they want to make me the villain, they better prepare for a story. I hit stop, closed the laptop. They wanted to play dirty. Fine, so would I. It had been 3 days since I started the Family Spin Machine folder. I hadn't touched it since that night. I figured the message was clear enough. I wasn't responding. I wasn't giving in. Sunday afternoon arrived like any other. Quiet, warm, unremarkable. The kind of lazy day meant for soft laundry piles and overdue grocery lists. I was in the middle of watering my small collection of overachieving succulents lined up along the window when my phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it at first. I had Do Not Disturb on, but calls from the building's front desk always came through. When I checked, it wasn't a scam or a telemarketer. It was real. "Hi, Ms. Mallory," the voice said over speaker. "Your parents are here. They say it's urgent. They're in the lobby." I froze mid-step. My watering can tilted slightly, a few drops spilling onto the hardwood. My mind tried to find logic in that sentence, like it had been spoken in a foreign language. I hadn't spoken to them since the will, since the post, since Seraphine's backhanded online pity party. I took a breath, then another. Tell them I'll be down in 5, I said, and hung up. I didn't rush. I rinsed my hands, dried them slowly, and took a long sip of lukewarm coffee. My heartbeat was steady, not calm, but contained. I slipped on my sandals, tucked my phone into my back pocket, and rode the elevator down without once checking the mirror. When the doors slid open, it was like walking into a staged play. Odessa stood closest, arms crossed in that familiar, I'm deeply hurt but still dignified stance. Leland stood a step behind her, hands in his pockets, his mouth set in a hard, neutral line. Seraphine leaned against the wall like she was waiting for a brunch table. Her arms were crossed too, but in a way that said, "Can we get this over with?" Nobody smiled. Odessa stepped forward first. "We need to talk, Taryn," she said, her voice tight. "You're being unreasonable." Unreasonable. Not hurt. Not betrayed. Just inconvenient. "I'm not sure what you expected," I replied calmly. "After what I saw and what you all posted, I'm surprised you're here at all." "You've made your point," Leland said, as if we were negotiating a contract. "Now come fix this." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Seraphine finally spoke. "Are you serious? You're still mad about the will? Grow up." And there it was. The real reason they were here. Not to explain, not to apologize, to shut me up, to put the pieces back in place. I stepped a little closer, careful to keep my tone level. "You made decisions without me. You left me out of your plans. Now you can live with the outcome." Odessa blinked like I'd slapped her. "Taryn, it's not that simple. You've always been so independent." "You didn't need anything." "That was convenient, wasn't it?" I said. "As long as I didn't ask for anything, I could carry everything." "Don't twist this," Leland snapped. "We were trying to protect what's ours." "What's yours?" I repeated. "Even when I was paying for it." Seraphine rolled her eyes. "I'm not doing this," she said, pushing off the wall. "You want to martyr yourself, fine, but stop blaming us for being the ones Mom and Dad actually trusted." I looked her straight in the eye. Trust or enable? She turned away. Odessa looked like she was on the verge of tears. "Honey, we're family. Families help each other." "Families don't rewrite history," I said. "They don't erase the person who held it together." Leland stepped forward, voice low. "You think you're the only one who sacrificed. We gave up plenty. You just never saw it." "Maybe," I replied, "but I documented mine." That froze the room. I could see it in their eyes, just for a second, that they realized I wasn't bluffing. I took one more step forward. "I'm not going to be your financial crutch anymore. If you keep trying to control the narrative, I'll show people who really kept this family afloat." Leland's jaw tensed. Odessa wiped at her eyes with the edge of her sleeve, as if tears would change my mind. Seraphine crossed her arms again, but this time it was more defense than arrogance. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said, softer now. "But I won't protect anyone either. Not anymore." There was a long pause. Then I added, "You can leave now, or I'll call security." Odessa gasped. Leland looked stunned. Seraphine gave a dry, bitter laugh. "Wow." "I'm serious," I said. "This conversation is over." No one moved right away, but I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer comfort. Eventually, Leland gave a curt nod. He turned and walked toward the exit. Odessa hesitated, looked at me like she wanted to say something meaningful, but settled for silence. Seraphine didn't even look back. When the doors shut behind them, I stood still for another minute. I could feel the front desk clerk watching from her post, probably trying to pretend she wasn't listening. I didn't care. I walked to the elevator, rode it up to my floor, stepped into my apartment, and locked the door. Then I leaned back against it and whispered to no one but myself, "This was your last warning." The thing about warnings is, people like my sister never believe them. They don't take them seriously because they think you won't follow through. They assume you're bluffing, too scared to do anything that might make them uncomfortable. And in the past, maybe that was true. Maybe I did bite my tongue, swallow the sting, and just keep moving. But not this time. Not after everything. It was Thursday morning when the attack came. Not with fists or lawsuits, but with words, spun and sharpened like glass. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, going through invoices, sipping lukewarm coffee out of a chipped mug I refused to throw away, when the email landed. The subject line read, "Hey, thought you should see this." It was from a former client, Deanna. I'd done her taxes for 3 years. Her email tone was hesitant, polite, like someone delivering bad news they didn't want to own. I opened the forwarded message. My stomach turned. It was an email from Seraphine, sent to at least 24 people, contacts I recognized from the professional networking group I'd been part of for years. Former clients, local entrepreneurs, small business owners in our area. The message was dressed in soft concern and toxic sweetness. "I'm reaching out because I'm deeply worried about my sister, Taryn. As many of you know, she's been struggling lately, emotionally and mentally. She's been making claims about our family that are simply not true, and I'm afraid she may lash out in ways that damage her reputation and yours." She went on to imply that I had been unstable, irrational, dealing with untreated trauma, and that my recent financial decisions had become erratic. She ended with, "I urge you to be careful in continuing professional associations with her. This isn't about punishment, it's about protecting those we care about." No signature, just her name, typed clean at the bottom, like she was a damn lawyer. I sat frozen for a minute, hand hovering over my mouse. This wasn't just petty. This was sabotage. This was calculated. A text came in an hour later from a small business I'd been consulting for the last year. "Hi, Taryn. Just a heads up. We're going to pause the Q4 project. Some internal changes. We'll reach out if we resume." Then another. "Hi. We're reassessing vendor partnerships this season. Thanks for all your help. Wishing you the best." No one said anything directly. They didn't need to. The silence told me more than the words. By lunch, I had 3 canceled contracts. The income dip for next month was enough to make my jaw tighten. This wasn't just a hit to the wallet. It was a gut punch to my name, my work, my sense of being. I paced the apartment, fists clenched. My heart pounded with a mix of fury and something quieter, deeper, disbelief. They were willing to burn my career just to make me look small. I paused by the window, looking out at the quiet street below, watching someone walk their dog like the world hadn't shifted. Then I exhaled and smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't fake, it was focused. She wanted to play dirty. Fine, but I'd play with precision. I sat down at my computer and opened Canva. Designed a card from scratch. Front of the card, white background, gold lettering. Very classy. "Congratulations, Seraphine." Inside, I wrote, "For earning the family fortune, must feel incredible to be rewarded for absolutely nothing." Below it, I inserted a QR code. That code led to a private Google Drive folder I'd curated over the last 2 weeks. Every receipt, every transfer, every thank you text for things I'd paid for, screenshots of Seraphine's Instagram posts claiming upgrades to her house I'd funded, emails from my parents asking for help, proof of mortgage payments, copies of utility bills addressed to me. It wasn't a smear campaign. It was the truth. And it was all time-stamped. I printed the card on thick cardstock, sealed it in a cream-colored envelope, added a wax stamp for flair. I wasn't petty. I was deliberate. That afternoon, I drove to her condo. No one was home, and I wasn't about to waste time knocking. I slipped the envelope under her door and left. By dinner, I'd almost forgotten I sent it. Almost. I spent the evening cleaning out my inbox, doing laundry, answering a few emails from clients who hadn't fled. I made soup, watched a rerun of a show I'd half-loved, watered my succulents before bed. Then, at 11:52 p.m., I checked the analytics on the QR code. Accessed, opened on an iPhone in Austin, 2 views, then 3. She was going through it. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. A text from Seraphine. "Are you serious?" I stared at the screen, didn't type, didn't reply, just let the silence speak for me, because I wasn't playing to shock her. I was playing to end this. I powered down the phone, pulled the blinds closed, walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. As I wiped my cheeks dry, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Something in my eyes had shifted. Not hardened, but cleared. She wanted a game. I was done playing defense. You wanted to play games, I whispered, steady and quiet. Now you'll learn I play to finish them. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. It arrived Friday afternoon, buried among grocery flyers and a reminder about jury duty I already planned to ignore. Padded, beige, with my name handwritten across the front in small, careful print. No return address, no postmark, just weight and implication. I carried it to the kitchen counter and stood for a moment, fingertips grazing the seal. Something told me to brace. I peeled it open. Inside was a copy of the will. The original will. Not the edited, butchered version I'd found on Mom's desktop. The one that erased me like a typo. No, this one had my name front and center. To our daughter, Taryn Mallory, who has stood with us through every storm, we bequeath our family home, all joint assets, and the full estate to be distributed at her discretion. My breath caught. Folded alongside the document was a short note, scrawled in blue ink. They changed it after a fight with Seraphine. Thought you should know. G.H. Gideon Hale, the family's old legal contact. He'd been around since I was 12. Always kind, always polite, always watching more than he spoke. I sat down at the table, the sunlight slanting across my bare arms, the silence inside my apartment feeling more electric than still. They changed the will after a fight. They rewrote our family legacy because Seraphine had thrown a tantrum. All the years I spent paying off their emergency bills, all the weekends I lost helping them patch up that sagging house, all the holidays where I smiled while Seraphine took credit for gifts I bought, undone by one dramatic episode, and they didn't even tell me. They just cut me out and assumed I'd never notice. I added the will to my digital folder, scanned it in with the others, receipts, emails, bank statements. Then I emailed copies to Gideon, my attorney friend Elaine, and one to myself with the subject line, "Proof, for later." I was still staring at my screen when my phone buzzed with a new message from Mom. "Family dinner this Saturday. 6:30. We'd like to move forward." Move forward. As if we were coming out of a mild disagreement, as if they hadn't buried me in their decisions and expected me to send flowers from under the dirt. I didn't respond, but I marked the date. The restaurant was a local Italian place they liked for big occasions, cheap wine, white tablecloths, and enough noise to keep things civil. I arrived at 6:28, on purpose. Odessa greeted me like nothing had happened. Her makeup was done to perfection, subtle, age-appropriate, and calculated. "Taryn," she smiled, "you look tired. Busy week?" Leland offered a handshake like we were business partners closing a deal. "Glad you made it." Seraphine barely glanced up from her phone. "Hey," she muttered, as if this was brunch and not a confrontation staged under the guise of lasagna. I sat down, unfolded my napkin, and waited. Leland dove in first. "We've all had some time to cool down," he began. "Let's not rehash the past. We want to focus on solutions." "What kind of solutions?" I asked. Odessa's smile twitched. "Well, we'd like to put the drama behind us." "And move forward," Seraphine chimed in, eyes still glued to her screen. "Like adults." I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and hit play. The recording filled the table like a dropped glass. All I had to do was fake one panic attack and, poof, the will changed. Taryn's a doormat. They'll never believe her. Seraphine's voice, slurred slightly, cocky, unmistakable. Forks froze midair. Odessa's hand went to her chest. Leland's jaw tightened. Seraphine finally looked up. "You recorded me?" she hissed. "No," I said. "Your friend Darla did." "Apparently, even she has a conscience. You think this proves something?" she snapped. "It proves you lied," I said. "It proves you manipulated your way into a legacy that wasn't yours." Leland cleared his throat. "This isn't the place." "Isn't it?" I asked. "Because you called this meeting. You said we were moving forward. I'd like to know from where exactly." Odessa looked like she might cry. "Taryn, sweetheart, we didn't mean for this to hurt you. We just—" Seraphine was struggling. I stared at her. "I wasn't?" She flinched. I reached into my purse again, pulled out a copy of the original will, and slid it across the table. Leland didn't touch it. You want to move forward? I said quietly. Let's start with updating the lawyer. And maybe the state. Odessa choked on her wine. Seraphine shoved back her chair. This is pathetic, she said. You can't undo what's already been filed. Maybe not, I said, but I can show people who you really are. I can show them all. Leland stood abruptly. Taryn, we don't need to escalate this. I stood too. You built everything on lies, I said. I'm just handing you the bill. I walked out before anyone could respond. And I didn't look back. The following week was a blur of phone calls and planning. None of it from them. Not a single word from my parents or Seraphine. Not even a snide text or a passive-aggressive email. Just quiet. But that wasn't peace. That was the sound of preparation. The real message came Friday night, tucked inside a group email Odessa had sent to the extended family and a few community leaders. The subject line read, Celebrating Family Unity. A catered community dinner. Saturday. At the same church hall where they used to host our holiday parties, I stared at the invite on my screen, trying not to let the irony choke me. Unity. After years of exclusion and manipulation. Still, I RSVP'd, yes, because sometimes the only way to end a story is to let everyone read the last chapter together. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in clean black slacks, a black blouse, neutral, polished, grieving something no one could name but me. Inside, the hall was already buzzing. Long tables lined the space, draped in white linens, dotted with centerpieces made of faux greenery and tea lights. Buffet trays steamed on side tables. Laughter echoed off the high ceiling. From the corner of the room, Leland waved me over with a smile that looked more political than parental. Odessa floated toward me next, arms outstretched like we were actresses in a reunion scene. Taryn, you look beautiful, she said, her voice sugary and shallow. So glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. I spotted Seraphine across the room, laughing with a woman in heels too high for a potluck. She didn't even glance my way. We made small talk for a few minutes, just enough to avoid suspicion. Then, during the reflection moment Leland called for after the second round of food, I stood. I'd like to say something, I said, calm and even. Odessa's smile froze. Leland looked wary. Seraphine finally looked up. I walked to the small podium at the front of the room and opened my laptop, which I'd carried in my tote. I connected the HDMI cable to the overhead projector. No one moved to stop me. The screen behind me flickered to life, and the title slide appeared in large black font over a white background. The Good Daughter. What it really cost. I clicked to the first slide, a receipt. HVAC replacement, $6,200, paid in full by T. Mallory, 2019. Click. Property taxes, 3 years. Total, $9,486, paid via direct transfer. Click. Screenshots of text messages. Thanks for covering again, Taryn. We'll figure out repayment soon. Can you handle the electric bill this month? Things are tight. Please don't mention this to Seraphine. She's stressed. I kept clicking. Hospital copays, car repairs, grocery deliveries, mortgage assistance. Slide after slide of financial proof, time-stamped, documented. The room had gone dead silent. Then came the emails. Subject lines. Urgent help needed. One more thing. Can you please step in again? Next slide. The original will. My name listed clearly as primary heir. Then the revised one. My name reduced to a passing mention of deep love. Last slide. A video clip. The audio began to play. All I had to do was fake one panic attack and poof, the will changed. Taryn's a doormat. They'll never believe her. Seraphine's voice, crystal clear. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped their fork. Odessa's wine glass trembled in her hand. Leland's face turned a sickly pale. Seraphine stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. You ruined us, she shouted across the room. I didn't flinch. No, I said, holding her gaze. You ruined yourselves. I closed the laptop. The silence held for another beat before the murmurs started, soft at first, then louder, more pointed. She paid for the house? Did you know this? She's been supporting them for years? Leland stood and walked out without a word. Odessa sat frozen, mouth slightly open. Seraphine looked at me like I was a stranger, and I was. I had become someone they no longer recognized. The next morning, I received a call from a real estate agent representing my parents. Their house was on the market. "We're hitting a snag with the title," she said. "Your name is still listed as a secondary lien holder on the deed from the 2017 refinancing." That was true. Back when I had helped them avoid foreclosure, I'd been added to the paperwork, temporarily, they said. They never removed me. "So," she continued, "they need your signature to release it, just a formality, but we're hoping you can come by this week." "No," I said. A pause. "I'm sorry?" she asked. I said no, I repeated, voice calm. "They made choices. They can live with the consequences." Click. I sent a certified letter that afternoon, one line, typed in black ink. "You made your choice. I'm just enforcing it." I never heard back, not from them, not from the realtor, not from Seraphine. And honestly, I didn't expect to. 2 months had passed since the dinner. I still lived in the same one-bedroom apartment off Koenig Lane, still made my own coffee in the mornings, still walked the same route to the post office on Thursdays, and still kept my phone on silent more than I probably should have. The inbox was quieter these days. Clients I trusted stayed. The rest had quietly slipped away, and I let them go without a fight. My workload shrank, but my peace grew. And that trade felt more than fair. I hadn't heard from my parents since I mailed the certified letter. Not a voicemail, not a postcard. Seraphine, too, had gone dark. I figured it was over. Until the morning the letter came. It was a cloudy Wednesday, just after I'd watered the succulents. I found the envelope wedged between a pizza flyer and an energy bill, and I knew that handwriting before I even flipped it over. Henrietta Quinn, my grandmother. I hadn't seen her since the summer before the will drama started. Mom said visiting her made things too emotionally heavy and insisted I stop dropping by the nursing home unannounced. I never pushed back. That's on me. But I stood on my porch now, barefoot and still wearing a faded Women Who Code t-shirt, holding this envelope like it might evaporate. I walked inside, set it gently on the kitchen table, and made myself wait. I poured coffee. I folded the towel I'd left crumpled on the counter. Finally, I sat down, opened it, and unfolded the single page inside. "Taryn, you were always the one who gave without asking. I saw it. I stayed quiet too long. I'm sorry, but I hope this letter tells you you were never invisible to me. Love, Grandma H." There was no flair to her words, no elaborate explanation. Just clarity. Folded inside the page was a photo I hadn't seen in decades. Me, no older than 6, standing on a stool in her kitchen, covered in flour and holding a crooked cookie. She was behind me, beaming, mid-laugh. That picture used to hang in her bedroom. I ran my thumb across the edge of the image, remembering the smell of cinnamon and the way she always said, "The dough knows if you're tense." That memory unraveled another. A winter day, 3 years ago. I had called ahead to see Grandma after a particularly rough month. Mom picked up and said, "She's not up for visitors. It's just too stressful for her when emotions run high." So I stopped by anyway, with flowers in hand. They didn't let me in. I stood in the lobby of that place with a bouquet of tulips and a heart full of guilt. I watched through the glass as a nurse wheeled her down the hallway. Grandma didn't see me, or if she did, she didn't show it. I left the flowers at the front desk and cried in my car for 15 minutes. It was the last time I tried to visit, and now, here she was, showing up for me in the simplest, most powerful way. She saw me, always had. I didn't write back, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew she wouldn't expect it. That letter had been enough. Instead, I wrote in my journal. They never apologized, and I no longer need them to, but I'll never pretend it didn't hurt. That night, I went online and made a donation to a local women's shelter, $2,000 in Grandma's name. Next, I opened my own will. I'd started it after everything blew up but never finished. I completed it now. No mention of my family, no conditions. Everything I owned, modest as it was, would go to an educational fund for women like me, women who carried too much and were thanked too little. 2 weeks later, I spoke at a community panel. The theme was invisible work and emotional labor. They asked if I wanted to speak as an accountant. I said no. I told my story, not the juicy parts, not the legal battle, but the heart of it. What it means to give everything and be written out anyway. What it means to reclaim your name, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Afterward, a woman came up to me in tears. "That could have been me," she whispered. I smiled. It was enough. A few nights later, I took a walk. The sun had set early, and the air was crisp in that way September air always is, still summer on the surface but with fall sneaking in at the edges. I walked past the old Vale house. The porch paint was peeling now. The grass hadn't been mowed in weeks. A crooked "for sale" sign hung by one chain, barely upright. The windows were dark, no signs of life inside. Funny how a house can look abandoned even before it's empty. I stood there for a while, hands in my coat pockets, thinking about all the years I tried to hold it all together. About the girl who bought groceries instead of plane tickets, who patched roofs while her sister posted filtered photos from poolside brunches, and then I turned away. "That house is just wood and walls," I whispered to the quiet street. I am what holds value now. Sometimes the ones who stay quiet the longest are the ones carrying the most weight. This wasn't just a story about inheritance, it was about the cost of silence and the power of finally speaking up. So let me ask you, have you ever been the one holding everything together, only to be pushed aside when it mattered most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this hit home for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more real, emotional stories like this one.